Here with us at the AIDA half-year conference in Gothenburg. This is the Human Rights Talk, and it's wonderful that we have got the two speakers who were just on the stage not so long ago that are joining us. So thank you so much, Annika. We have Annika Lindberg, who is from the School of Global Studies at the University of Gothenburg, and also thank you very much, Martin Burgers, who is the co-chair of the AIDA Human Rights Committee here at AIDA. So just before this session, we actually had a really nice talk about sustainability, talking about what Gothenburg is doing, what AIDA is doing. And as we were talking about creating green events, we then got onto a far broader discussion around sustainability and what is required for a sustainable society. And from the session that you've just had just now, we were thinking, gosh, you know, migration really is a systemic product of climate change, of global capitalization. So I'd love to hear your thoughts from the session you've just done.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us here. And you're absolutely right in pointing out the interconnections between migration as something that is a predictable, if not exactly systemic outcome of a lot of the processes we're seeing with climate change and disasters, with mass drought and the impoverishment that follows from that, with wars that go on over resources, over geopolitical conflicts. And hence what we just talked about in this panel about sort of how refugee status and refugee politics is driven by constant sort of legislative changes and a sense of exceptionality. So this belief that refugees is something short-term, temporary, that requires emergency solutions, whereas in fact it's something that is, as we see, often protracted, often long-standing, and that requires sort of long-term goals and long-term policies that are able to address this sort of systemic issues.
Yeah, I think it even mentioned in the session before that it could be 17 years where someone...
That is the average time that a person is displaced. I think this is numbers from the UNHCR from a couple of years ago. And, well, again, this was a couple of years ago, and today I would believe we could even add numbers to that, because what we see is a lot of the conflicts that have been ongoing for decades, and, again, a lot of the global processes of climate change has led to the uprooting of people from their lands and their communities. And hence, migration is nothing exceptional, but it is a way of being in the world, right? And unfortunately, so is forced displacement in its various forms. And so when I say forced displacement, I don't only talk about the narrow sort of focus of the Refugee Convention, but there's also been more and more talks of sort of climate refugees and what happens when people are forced from their homes due to climate disasters and processes that make life unsustainable and unlivable in certain parts of the world. And this is just something that needs to be considered on a sort of broader political level.
Absolutely. And you were saying also, you know, that rights are way more limited now since 2015, but there is a wave of solidarity and a shift in attitude, maybe? Can you share any thoughts?
Yeah, so on the one hand, the war in Ukraine and the mass displacement crisis that this has caused has, of course, resulted in an immediate response that is unprecedented in the European context. We saw how the EU, within a week after the Russia's invasion, activated this temporary protection directive, which basically is a mechanism for providing temporary protection on a group basis for huge numbers of refugees. As we just talked about during the panel, this is perhaps mainly put in place to ease the sort of administrative burden on host states, to be able to process people quickly, but also to enable them to remain, at least temporarily, and enjoy protection in other societies as the war rages on their country. And even though having seen sort of political attitudes swiftly changing before, which was the case in 2015, even though the solidarity outburst was not as strong, but it was definitely short-lived. And unfortunately, we've seen how that happens before, that there's sort of a political fatigue with refugee hosting, or as political attention diverts to elsewhere, support for hosting refugees has declined in the past. And the Ukrainians, are of course also at risk of this happening to them. But if I want to be positive, then I guess I would say that we could seize this as an opportunity to actually try out what refugee solidarity would look like, which might mean then to reverse some of these very problematic legislations that were put into place after 2015. Some of the ones that we talked about during the panel included right to family reunification, There's again temporariness of residence status and the rights retractions in terms of access to welfare, to education, precarious labor market conditions that come with that. So ideally, we could see this as an opportunity to seize, to really look at what does the current immigration legislation and refugee legislation do, and how could we improve it to actually enhance sustainable protection for people, regardless of whether they in the end choose to stay or not.
Yes, and at least a more of a sense of belonging if you feel that you're not there for 17 years, but it's still very temporary, that you do have rights and you can contribute and feel part of something. It's great to have you here as well, Martin. Perhaps you can share some of the things that you've seen or things that are happening with AIDA, with this global community of lawyers.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. Obviously, we were shocked, as anybody else, I guess, in the world, by recent developments in Ukraine and the war that's now there, the refugees that seek shelter. And the good part, indeed, is that we're apparently able to shift pace and welcome people in need. And we already discussed that there's many difficulties there attached to it, and it kind of needs to be better. And I think for one, us lawyers applying all laws, we also will be the first ones to see where the laws and the legislation is not working, and that needs not to be accepted, but it needs to be mentioned, it needs to be articulated. So that's one thing. Furthermore, from our association, what we've done is we created a special task force for Ukraine, led by lawyers of the 6 neighboring countries, and they're distributing work, but they need help, obviously. So if, regardless the expertise that you have, you could sign up for help. And even if you're doing employment in the Netherlands or financial law in France, there's always some relevance, some expertise. Just make yourself known and help. You can also find more information on AIDA. AIDA is also having job opportunities for Ukrainian refugees with a legal background, but much more. There's information about housing, childcare, healthcare, a lot of relevant stuff that we can help migrants with, and that's only for covering the current crisis, but it's broader. So that are the things that we do, and as I think many of you know, we've teamed up with Trial International for the past year. Trial International is the organization trying to make a real difference by going into the areas around the world where there's violations of human law, the state of law is not respected, rule of law is not respected, and bringing courts, bringing people to justice, help the judicial systems in those jurisdictions to come to verdicts of warlords and perpetrators, and also Trial International is in need of the same help. So again, if you have some expertise on corporate law or tax law, it doesn't matter which jurisdiction. If you think or if you want to help, raise your hand, go to the Trial International website, or contact the Human Rights Committee at AIDA. We will put you in contact, and then there could be a point of time that your personal expertise, stuff that you already know, you can use to aid those organizations, aid the Special Task Force for Ukraine, and help our colleagues helping people in need. So that will be the things that we can do, and apart from that, obviously, the obligatory financial donations, but that goes without saying, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. But it's great also that there's the opportunity to mobilise where there are resources that can help. And as you said in the session, you know, there is a moral obligation on society. So I hope that some of the things that AIDA are doing and what you've shared today. But if you have any final comments, we're so appreciative that you could join us for this short session that's going out to our digital audience that are unable to join us here in Gothenburg. But any final words before we close?
No, thank you so much. And I think just to pick up on what you just said about there's also this importance of, and I think the kind of helps that you mentioned, they don't only speak to the sort of emergency situation that people find themselves in right now, but also that refugeeness is also not the only thing that characterizes a person, obviously, as we know. This is a temporary legal status, and to actually enhance the participation of these people in societies worldwide, then all different skills are being needed, and their skills need to be recognized as well. And so I think there's something important there in that not only the sort of short-term humanitarian aid or thinking about how refugee law needs to be changed, but overall how to enhance and strengthen rights and participation of people of different origins, of different skills, of different backgrounds is something that is really important for all of us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Annika. Thank you, Martin. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.